My name is Mike. This is our seventh employer workshop. We record these. It's being recorded now, and we put them onto our YouTube channel so people can pop back in at their convenience and watch them asynchronously. That's the new fancy word that we use. I work for Community Futures Entre-Corp, and I'm in the office today, and the backlighting off of my bald head will blind everybody. So I've got the blinds down and a ball cap on, so the glow off my head doesn't blind. You can't see my face. We started this project a little over a year ago. Or I guess, well, about a year ago, and then we started launching these in September. And the point was we did this big brood business retention and workforce development survey, and we determined there were a bunch of needs for the business community, some of which we just talked about, Rob. And what we're trying to do is increase the capacity of our local businesses. So we've got a series of webinars among other projects. This is the 7th of 8. It's actually the 9th of 10 if you go onto the YouTube channel, but we were doing this in response to COVID before the project formally kicked off. A quick land territory acknowledgement from Community Futures. So we acknowledge that Southern Alberta occupies unceded Indigenous land, that the Blackfoot Confederacy never surrendered their land in the signing of Treaty 7, but agreed to share it. Today, Southern Alberta is home to a diverse population of Indigenous peoples, which now includes Métis Region 3, Inuit, and other Indigenous people. I'd like to thank our primary partner, particularly in funding, and that is Alberta Labour and Immigration. They make this possible in conjunction with our efforts here. And then let's move on to the topic. The topic today, as we've been talking about off camera, is the gig economy and gig workers. And as we've been just bantering about, it's probably a bigger thing than most people give acknowledgement of. So your participation today is going to be really valuable to people as they watch this asynchronously down the line. So thank you for coming, and feel free to participate. Until we get to breakout rooms, which I think we'll probably just stay in one big room today, which is good because breakout rooms are not generally recorded. So if we can stay in one big room, somebody coming in here. If we can stay in one big room, then we get to put that on video. So I encourage you to keep up the courage you've got, keep your cameras on. We'll just ask you to mute yourself as Ada's presenting, but when we go into breakout rooms and it's cameras on, mics on, everybody's free to go. So Ada is somebody that we've worked with before. Ada was the first workshop that we kicked off back in September. Ada's up in Edmonton dealing with a frozen water main and flooding. We're sorry to hear that, Ada. Ada's got an MBA and she's a CPHR. She's done lots and lots of these, and she does really great work. She's a regular keynote speaker on HR, people management, career search, networking, and a bunch of other topics. And she's an instructor at U of A and MacEwan. So it's my pleasure to bring Ada back once again. The ground rules are pretty simple. We'll have a chat box running. I'll manage the chat and let Ada just move along through the presentation in the interest of time. If there are questions, by all means, throw them into chat, and then I'll point Ada to them as we go. We'll have some Q&A time at the end. I will send you all a link with the recording in a day or two once I get it up there. And on that note, I'm going to quickly do a quick little poll. Just a quick question to get you thinking, your thinking caps on, and to give some feedback to Ada. So here's the first poll question. And I'll let you take a peek at that. And then I'm going to hand the floor over to Ada and mute myself and turn my camera off and enjoy the presentation. You ready to go, Ada?
Thank you, Mike. I am.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. And I can see the results from people. So I'm going to end the polling. And now you can see the results. So because we have a small group today and everyone comes to this webinar for a different reason, which I love, which means that I'm going to touch on a little bit of everything today. So one of you joined here because you're thinking about exploring alternative staffing arrangement or staffing model. One of you is thinking about hiring gig workers, which is excellent. And one of you have used gig workers in the past, just want to learn more. And two of you think that's a trendy topic, which I'm happy to hear. I am going to share my screen and oops, the wrong screen to share. I'm going to share my screen and then you can see the presentation. So just to play with this a little bit. Okay, so if you can see the screen, please give me a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. So you can see the screen, perfect. So the title for today's topic is Your Workforce Design for Today or for Tomorrow. And typically when I do present, I have a presenter and then my name and my credential. But actually today I thought since we're on the topic about gig workers, I'm going to call myself a gig worker. And as Mike had already introduced, I am. The same as many millennials in this generation that we switch jobs more often, more easily than the older generations. And so just over 5 years ago, I actually wanted to take advantage of my entrepreneurship spirit and start my own HR consulting business because my entire career has been in human resources. And along with that, I do have a partner who does business technology consulting. So I myself is a gig worker and we hire gig workers in our organization too. So long story short, let's get started. But first of all, I want to ask you, have you hired people before? If you have hired people before, you can give me a thumbs up. Yeah, everybody has. Great. And now I'm going to test your knowledge with using the Zoom platform. On the bottom of your Zoom platform, you see a reactions button. And you can choose one face icon or one heart icon, whatever icon you choose, to tell me about your overall feeling of hiring someone. Click on the icon that represents your feeling about hiring someone. Hit and miss, isn't it? I agree. Some of you are really excited to have hired great people. Others are, in my human resources career, I have hired over 300 people, but even that, a lot of times, it still feels like a gambling game. Hiring gig workers, is it much different or is it similar? That's something we're going to explore today. So traditionally, when an organization has a vacancy to fill, or if they need to enlarge their team for bigger projects, they would put a job description together. That job description gets turned into a job posting, which is an advertisement. And then we spread the word out and post it somewhere, hoping for the most suitable candidates would apply. Once we generate a pool of candidates, then we go through the typical selection process, the interviews, the testings, the background checks, the references, all of these good stuff. Once an offer is negotiated and signed, we thought we can take a deep breath. Not just yet. We still have to go through the orientation process, the onboarding, and hope the new hire will pass probation with success. And then that's only just the beginning of the employee's entire life cycle with an organization. From that moment, we think about fit, performance, attitudes, behaviors, attendance, training and further developing of the new hire. And what about changes in their life that would impact their performance? Well, do we need to make accommodations? Do we need to think about pay and benefits, promotions, all of these great stuff? Traditionally, employers would hope to have long tenured, dedicated employees who give them 100%. And traditionally, employees would also hope to have a long successful career with one employer or two employers max, and with great pay and pension and benefits. That sounds like a really happy match, doesn't it? But something is not there, something is missing. So in my humble opinion, is actually that the traditional staffing model only takes care of the workforce of yesterday or today instead of looking into tomorrow. And that's what we're going to focus on today. because technology has truly changed the way we work. How we work, where we work, when we work, what we actually do, and even who we work for. And with the newer generation coming to the workplace, so society, the demographics also have changed. I see the younger generations coming into the workplace asking the question about what's in it for me before they show any demonstration of contribution to the workplace. They want it to be challenged a job. They want it to be a fun job. It's interesting, aligning with their work and life balance, supporting their hobbies, supporting their mental health, supporting their career interests. At the same time, they're demanding for options to work from home, flexible hours, flexible location, flexible benefits and perks, and et cetera, and et cetera. The society and organizations have realized all of these changes, so they want to adapt. They become more nimble, and they realize in order to attract, motivate, and retain these workers, they need to do something different. But at the same time, organizations today are facing greater than ever challenges, competitions, scarce resources, and especially with challenges imposed by the soft economy and the current pandemic. People and organizations both have realized that there is no job for life anymore. So in order to have some stability financially or mentally, people are looking for more than one employment or more than one source of income. And hence on the audience pool today we have here, we already heard from a few audience of you that you do more than just one thing. There's another fancy term called slashy, which means that person or a professional has multiple careers or multiple jobs or occupations. That's just the trend we're in right now. So in the next 75 minutes or so, I'm going to take you to think about your work and your workforce in a different manner. First of all, we're going to talk about your workforce mix. By that, I mean the composition of your workforce, the types of people that you have. And then that's a preliminary step of the overall workforce planning. We think about who can be your part of your current workforce, who can be part of your future workforce. What is a contingent workforce? How does a contingent workforce support your business plan? How does the trendy and fancy gig workers fit into the picture? And how do we recruit and manage gig workers versus the traditional employees? Let's Talk is an opportunity for us to do a group activity, and then at the end, just do some final tip sharing about hiring for tomorrow and leave lots of time for Q&A. So that's the agenda for today. I am going to cheat a little bit. Before I do the deep dive into today's topic, I'm going to make you work really hard. So have you ever critically examined your workforce? If you have a smaller organization, this job is very easy to do. If you have a bigger organization, do your best well-educated guess. So in the next few minutes, I would like you to take out a piece of paper and pen, or use your pad, and just to write down the number of people occupies each of the categories, types of workers, as you see on the screen. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
While you're doing that, I'll just tell Ada how happy I am that we've gone this far without a Zoom bomb. So it looks like we're going to be okay. Knock on wood. We've had 2 in the office, so very pleased that hasn't happened. If it does, I'm just going to shut the meeting down immediately, and we'll give it a couple of minutes, and we'll come back in.
Sounds good. Mike, I'm also going to ask you to participate as well. If you can just write down how many people you have per category. All right, so if you have finished with the exercise, that's excellent. You're welcome to unmute yourself and let us know which category do you have majority of your workforce fall under. Is it employees?
Yes, for me, it's employees, basically. We do have about 20 contractors, but typically they'll be fall under employees.
Employees. Okay, good to know. Anybody else have other types of workers more than employees in your organization?
As a general rule, with our production company, we deal with a lot of more casual and contract gig workers than we have full-time staff. There's just myself and my partner, and we have one part-time employee here full-time.
Awesome, thank you. That's great to hear. And then the next question is, I'm also going to ask, either you can chat using chat box function or unmute yourself. What are the benefits you see of having employees versus having contractors? Why would you prefer to hire employees versus contractors?
Well, given right now and given the COVID situation, it's the only viable option for us in a live events system. We would have absolutely folded had we been full-time employee heavy as opposed to contract and gig employees.
Great, thank you.
I think I could speak for Sean and say that at Community Futures, I think there's value in in employees in continuity, in learning the ropes. It's very collaborative work, and there's a lot of people to learn, to know, and the systems are, it's very governmental, so there's a lot of layers and complexity that just takes time to wade through and learn. I've been here a while and I still don't understand most of it. So I think to make a pitch for full-time employees, that would be a pitch.
Great, thank you, Mike. Anybody else who would like to share what are the benefits of having employees versus contractors?
I know also, you got the cost, the overhead cost of, benefits and all that kind of stuff. Typically contractors don't come with benefits per se. So you're not covering that, that cost and just, benefits. And then, but I think Mark, or no, who was it talking before, that having that continuity between the full-time and the part-times and permanent employees, you're not always having to train them constantly on a new site and requirements. If you're having contractors and they're bringing them in to a new site, you've got that training that's got to be constantly going and retraining of what you require at your site. Where if you have permanent employees, you've trained them once, they have a pretty good idea what's required, but then you have to look at that overhead that comes with having the permanent employees.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Aaron, for your participation. So all of you would be right when it comes to pros and cons of having employees and contractors. It really depends on your organization's needs, the business plan, and also your staffing model, right? So there are pros and cons with each type of workers here. It depends on the cost, right? So that's associated with your budget. Depends on the type of work that needs to be done and what kind of results you expect to see, how much control you would like to have to the input, the resources, as well as the output and the outcomes. And then also how much administrative processes you're willing to take. Employees typically cost a little bit more administrative processes than a contractor, which we'll talk about more for freelancers and contractors today. Does any of your organization employ students or retirees? No? Okay. So students, and especially if you employ students through a co-op program or internship program, there are lots of good fundings available through the universities as well as through the governments. So students you're taking advantage of their fresh knowledge out of school. You're also taking advantage, hoping that the universities will help set up the recruitment process for your organization. Of course, students are cheaper. They're more vivid, they're more lively, they're easier to change, they're easier to accept new ideas, and they're not afraid to bring fresh ideas to your organization. Retirees or seniors are also great to hire. So in my humble consulting business, we have a team of 9 people. Except me and my partner, everyone else is a contractor. I do not use employees. That's our pet peeve, that's our preference, and that's our business model. But one of our contractors is a senior. I used to report to him, work for him under him when I was working corporation as an HR. And then since he retired, now he works with me at my company as a contractor. Really loyal, dedicated, always show up to meetings early, never late. If you ask him to do something, he'll work until really late just to figure out something. And if he does not know how to use technology, he will learn it. And you can always count on him. The connections that he has in the communities, the people he knows, and the resources and knowledge. Volunteers. Does any of your organization use volunteers? I see Rob nodding heads, and yeah, okay, great. Volunteers are also great resources to use as part of your workforce. One client organization that I support, they have a really good strategy staffing model. So they help volunteers, so people in between jobs, they get them to come to the nonprofit organization as volunteers, doing transactional type of work like receptionist, customer service, and simple admin paperwork. They train the volunteers, give them a certification of completion at the end of the training. So these volunteers are up to speed with the new technology, office procedures. And with the volunteers who have shown their dedication and hard work, eventually they get employed by this organization. What a great way to assess people's abilities to perform. Shared services. So if you operate a smaller organization, small to medium size, or even nonprofit, you may not have the need to have a full-time support person in-house. So when I say shared services support function, I mean the functions such as HR, IT, marketing, finance, accounting, health and safety, communications, graphic design, etc., etc. It's a lot of money and hustle to have these people in-house. If you can justify with a large size of operations, you may need them full-time. But for a smaller to medium-sized organization, there may not be the need to have them full-time. So why not share these resources with other organizations, like-minded organizations? One consultant I have the pleasure of working with, she supports a cluster of nonprofit organizations here in town. So she's an HR person for the cluster of organizations. I see that when she hires people, whenever she interviews candidates, if one candidate does not fit in for one organization for some reason, she will still consider the candidate for the other organizations as part of the cluster. The other cool thing is that these organizations as cluster will get together on a regular basis to share ideas, share resources, and best practices. What a great way of building community capacity. Others, you could outsource some of your functions, for example, like payroll, for example, or maybe accounting, or maybe customer service, or it could be other types of work that you want to outsource. Or I'm sure some small business start off with using free labor from your family members. That could also be a temporary option. So these are the different types of compositions of your workplace. What we have just gone through was a preliminary, really simplified version of a workforce planning. A systematic workforce planning looks at the business plan. So what is our business plan? What's our business model? What do we want to achieve as a business today and in the long run for tomorrow? Then we worry about the work that needs to be done and also the people we need to have. I divide up the work that needs to be done into 2 categories based on the contribution the work contributes to the organization. Core competency related work. The term core competency of our organization is pretty simple to understand. It's that combination of the workers, whether it's freelancers or employees or other types, though their knowledge, skill sets, experiences, qualifications, connections, as well as your technology, your unique approach, your methodology of getting the work done or getting the services or products produced. It's never about financial or tangible assets. It's always about what makes your organization standing out. The simplest way of looking at it is what makes you competitively advantaged to stay in business, especially in this tough economic situation that we're all in. So then, for example, for Apple, some of you may use Apple products. Their core competency is to have the cool, cutting-edge designs. And of course, they need to have the right people with that design thinking to support the production. For McDonald's, I don't know if you like it. I actually do like it. Sometimes eating unhealthy, I go there. I have also had McDonald's in Japan, for example. So McDonald's serves over 69 million customers in a day in over 100 countries. But you know what to expect just as you walk into that store. Their core competency is surrounding that standardization, that consistency. FedEx, for example, if you use their service for delivery, it's all about that on-time delivery and customer service. So those are the examples, the more vivid example or valid examples of core competencies of organization. So the question for you would be, what's making your organization different? Staying in business, what's your core competency? And what are the work that needs to be done to support your core competency? In another way of thinking that is, what other tasks that must be done in order for you to survive? And who are doing those tasks? On the other hand, the flip side of non-core competency related work, so these will be your routine, day-to-day stuff that add less value to the core competency or to the entire organization. But don't get me wrong, every organization has some level of non-core competency work. They just always exist. But the question is, in your organization, have you ever defined it? What are they? Who is doing that? Who should be doing that? Every one of us is actually doing some component of the non-core competency work in our day-to-day work. I just hope that we're now spending majority of our time on those tasks, versus our focus should be on the core competency work. Let's go to the people side. I divide up the people side into employee base of an organization and the contingent worker space. The contingent worker base is the list that we just discussed, except employees. So the contingent workers actually is not a new concept. It has been around. These are the workers that typically are not on your employee payroll. They're paid either for a short-term assignment, for a duration, or for a particular project or task, if you will. A lot of times, the most obvious type is the gig workers. They're also called freelancers, independent contractors, consultants, etc., and etc. So many fancy terms out there. A recent study has shown by Intuit is that 25 to 30% of the US workforce is actually already contingent, with 80% or more of large corporations are wanting to expanding substantially those contingent workforce in the next few years. So it's definitely not something new. It's trendy, but it's a matter of when it becomes the most relevant type of workforce. Love this picture. I really hope I can do this at this moment. So we already talked about students, retirees, volunteers, shared services. Let's focus on the gig workers. The first time I've actually heard the term gig workers, a gig, was when a friend of mine who plays in a music band invited me to join their performance. Gig is often used by musicians, but nowadays gig is being used as to describe a free market economy or sharing economy. People who fall under these categories are your shorter term assignments workers, people hired on demand, independent contractors, consultants. Very often we hear gig workers like IT programmers, for example, your marketing and social media gurus, your financial advisors, investment advisors, your accountants, your IT support help desk, your delivery drivers, your home repair technicians, and management consultants like myself, et cetera, and et cetera. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar today, I used to work full-time, receiving a steady pension and benefits and paycheck every other week, working in corporations as an HR person. But I always knew in myself, I have that drive of becoming an entrepreneur. And at the same time, I just did not like the organizational politics that I have to battle, which takes majority of my time away from the core competency work that I should be focusing on. So I joined the bandwagon and became a gig worker or freelancer myself. So what are some of the benefits? So we're going to talk about that, but I'm going to quiz you now by doing a poll question again, just to see if you're following. Okay, so now on the screen, you can see another poll question. What are your organization's concerns about hiring or using gig workers? Please take your moment to choose.
While they're doing that, I'll make an embarrassing admission. I didn't ever connect the gig, like the musician gigging, with gig worker. To me, it was 100% about, like multimedia design and, internet-based employment. And then I realized I had a business for 8 years, and I had a bookkeeper, right? I don't know how to, I'm not doing my books. And so she was with me for 8 years, but she wasn't in my office. She wasn't an employee of mine. And that worked out really well. It never even occurred to me Sean was actually like, no, like gig, like musicians. I'm like, oh yeah. I guess I'm not a millennial. Hey, Ada?
No, you look like one, Mike.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to end the polling. Okay. Thank you for your participation. I'm sharing the screen, sharing the results. So what are your organization's concerns when it comes to hiring or using gig workers? One person said, do not have the experience to hire or manage them. 2 people said, my organization thinking about hiring them. Okay, great. 2 people said, my organization has used them in the past, but want to learn more. And 1 person said, I want to develop my existing employee pool or talent pool. Excellent. Thank you for your participation. So let's talk about, is gig worker the right solution for your staffing model, for your business needs? First, before we talk about how to hire them, we need to think about your workplace environment. Is your organization ready to hire them? So we need to think about why we need to hire gig workers. We talk about the pros and cons of having gig workers or freelancers versus employees. Those are all great. Let's also think about why you actually need them. So a lot of organizations who hire gig workers is because of their expertise, their superior qualifications or connections or experiences within a particular industry or type of occupation that they do. Other reasons could be that your organization having urgent task or project that needs to be done, don't have enough hands inside the organization, so you're looking at temporary urgent support from outside. That could also be a reason. A third reason could be that you just do not have internal staff capacity or resources. You just need both expertise and extra hands. Or it could be that you want some outside expert to come into your workplace and help you build that internal capacity down the road. It could also be that you want to make sure that your organization is more flexible, more nimble, because having employees can be a little bit complicated or administrative heavy when it comes to recruiting, managing, and letting them go if something goes wrong. Having gig workers is a lot easier and more flexible of doing that. On top of that, gig workers do not need to be paid for benefits and pension, overtime, vacation pay, CPP, EI, all of these great things that regular full-time employees would be paid for. And they do not need a corner office. They do not need your uniform. They typically supply their own transportation and equipment. They have their own insurances and WCB and stuff. So they come in, they do the work. That's why they're there. And they want to collect a paycheck, of course, at the end of the project or task. They typically charge based on hourly rate or project rate or for a duration of, let's say, a month or a quarter or a year. It depends on the type of work you're asking them to do. And then the next question is, when you think about your organization's environment, is your organization flexible enough to allow the freelancers to work anywhere, or they must be in the office? How much interaction this person needs to have with your existing team? Does that need to happen in a central location, or can that be happening via technology remotely? Does that need to happen during a certain time, business hours, or can that happen anytime? How will the employees perceive of having outside contractors come in to do their job or doing higher level work? Will they perceive that as a threat, or will they perceive that as someone to learn from or collaborate with? I do have a contractor that I use in a different country. I take advantage of the time zone difference. So when I'm sleeping here in Canada, that person is a different time zone. She's working. So when I wake up in the morning, the work is already done. And then I work on my part during the day, send it to her. When I sleep, she does it again in the night. So I also take advantage of the time zone difference, but it may or may not work for your business. The organization also need to be really open-minded to accept outside and fresher perspectives. So when it comes to the nitty-gritty of hiring the gig workers, there are 6 channels that I would like to share that I find are quite helpful. First of all, I really like word of mouth and referrals. When my organization hires, as I mentioned, I do not have employees, so I always use contractors. I usually tap on the shoulders of people I already know, ask if they might be interested. Those people I already know, usually I know them for some time, so I know the quality of their work, their reputation, etc. Makes my life a lot easier. Or I ask my trusted connection to make a referral to me. Online platforms such as Upwork, Freelancer, TaskRabbit, and so many platforms out there. These online, they're not typical job boards, but they're online gig worker platforms that gig workers would input their information on the platform, and you can just do a search through these platforms. There is a fee to it, of course. Social media platforms. So LinkedIn is my go-to site when it comes to professional needs. Nowadays, LinkedIn has the feature that if someone is actively looking for work, you can see on their profile picture, they have a half green circle that says open to work. Have you seen that? So you've seen that and someone's profile catches your eyes, it does not hurt for you to send that person a direct message via LinkedIn and ask if that person be interested in either being an employee or being a contractor. And there's nobody said that a great contractor cannot be turned into an employee eventually if that's their need. LinkedIn also has a feature called Pro Finder. So if you go to LinkedIn Pro Finder, you input the type of task you want to have done. LinkedIn algorithm will supply you with recommendations of who you can talk to. Unsuccessful candidates are also can be an interesting source of contract workers. One organization I was helping my client organization to hire for at that time last year, 2 years ago, was a full-time permanent job. And we interviewed this lady, and she just made such a great positive impression on me and the client organization. Except she declined the job because after she realized how much traveling was involved. And guess what? During COVID, we recontact her and say, hey, everyone is working remotely, no more traveling. Would you consider our organization again? She said, yes. And we're like, well, unfortunately, at this moment, we can only offer you a temporary contract. Because of COVID, we're just uncertain about many things. She accepted in a heartbeat. Volunteers, like the example I gave about this nonprofit organization who turned volunteers eventually into employees or contract workers, that's also a great source of workers, gig workers. If you work for a governmental type of organization or public organization, and you have a large amount of value threshold of projects, let's say more than 50 grand, or let's say more than 75 grand, your organization's procurement policy will tell you to issue a public RFP, request for proposal. So this is usually for a bigger amount of value projects, and you want to solicit a wider audience, vendor companies to choose from. So you put all your criteria, your selection methods, and also what you're asking the vendor companies to do into a RFP. You publish it out there and give a timeline, and then the interested vendors will bid on it, submit a bid document. And then your organization will go through the evaluation process with a committee usually. You would score them, you would rank them, and award the highest scored or the best bidder with the contract. And again, if you work for a government organization or a public organization, and you have a small threshold of a value project, for example, a $10,000 or $15,000 value project, and you do not need to go through that complicated RFP process, You can do invitation to bid. So you know a few vendors in the market, or you have worked with someone before, you are welcome to invite them to bid on it, or cold call potential vendors to get quotes. If you are these type of organizations, always check with your procurement policy or procurement person in the organization first. Temporary or staffing agency works really well if you have an urgent need or a temporary need to fill, let's say, administrative type of work or transactional based type of work, labor, cleaning, housekeeping, customer service, serving, those kind of transactional based shorter term assignments. Staffing or temp agency, they charge a percentage or they charge a fixed fee, but they usually can supply you with a large number of gig workers very quickly. Networking events, that's where I always go to. Whether it's in person or virtually, it's a great way to get your organization's name out there. And this is also a great way where like-minded individuals will come to join the events. Then you get to meet with people within your industry or like-minded, and meet people who can be potentially contractors. If your organization hosts or participates in job fairs, it's also a great way to source both employees as well as contractors. The fact is, in this soft economy, many people, many candidates are actually open to either be an employee or be an independent contractor. And recently, I've helped an organization to tweak their job postings to be flexible enough to accept either employees or contractors. And we find that been very, very appealing to the job seekers. And at the end, just as you have gone through all the great selection process, you still want to make sure you talk to the potential contractors. Whether you want to interview them or show them around, company tour, whatever the case may be. You also want to verify their credentials by verifying their designations, educations, or tickets or certificates. Also obtaining a couple of references, talk to their past clients or organizations they have worked with. I would also suggest to check on their websites and social media just to verify what they said was actually authentic. So we have gone through the good recruitment selection process of gig workers or independent contractors. Now let's talk about the next steps. So how do we manage them? Once you got them on board, there is a contract that should be signed. If your organization is mature enough or has been around, have hired gig workers in the past, you probably have a template already built for a contract. Then that's easy. You pull the contract, make a few changes, have your gig worker sign it. Some companies I've seen is they ask the gig workers or contractors to supply with their own templates. They negotiate, they make changes, then they sign off on it. A couple of items or clauses I want to caution you on that, in my opinion, is very important to have on the contract. Include things like start and end dates. What's the project about? Task about? What do you expect people to do? What's the expected quality of work? What's the expected communication methods? Reporting frequency? What are you asking them to do? And the deadlines. Other things such as intellectual property. Who owns that? Who develops that? Who owns that? How about knowledge transfer? What happens at the end of the project when the project is completed? What happens to the documentation? What happens to the intellectual property? How about a termination clause? So we know it can be a little complicated to terminate an employment, but usually with a gig worker or freelancer, the contract will be very specific about how a contract can be ended. You're not terminating someone's employment in this situation, you're terminating a contract. Typically, what I have seen those contracts is that either the gig worker or the company can give, let's say, 10 business days or 15 business days of notice to either party in writing and finish the contract that way, unless something went sideways in between. If they broke the contract terms in between, or if their quality or there is something wrong with the work, of course you can break it off earlier. But if there is nothing wrong and you just cannot continue with the contract, then typically you want to have a clause in your contract. Onboarding. So yes, employees will have an onboarding after you have hired them. Contractors, I would also suggest to have an onboarding process. It does not need to be as detailed as an employee onboarding, but you still want to meet with them, show them around, introduce them to the key stakeholders they need to work with, make those introductions and contacts, tell them about your expectation, your communication preferences, what you expect them to do, etc., etc. And one organization that I have been supporting with a continued passion for a number of years, not just because of the work I do for them, I'm quite happy about. It's also because they always involve me. It's a medium-sized organization. They always involve me in their staff events, in their decision-making meetings. So I feel I'm part of them. Even though I'm an outsider, even though I'm an independent consultant, I can call majority of their employees by their name, actually. So I feel really good. I feel attached. And with that being said, the more I know about those organizations, the better results I can deliver, right? So you do want to have a vested interest in your contractors, make sure there's ongoing communication, make sure they actually know what's going on in your organization. As much as they understand your organization, your industry, your operations, and especially your challenges, the better results you get out of your contractors. Then at the end, make sure you have transfer of resources, work completed, documentation, everything sorted out. Confidentiality, I should have mentioned, is also another really important clause to have in the contract. What's considered confidential? What's considered what are the contractor's responsibilities and obligations to protect, safeguard confidential information? If you have hired your gig workers to, let's say, develop internal capacity, so you're hiring them to come into the workplace, do the job, but also train a trainer. So then you, at the end of the project's finish, you want to make sure that your internal capacity has been built and there's that knowledge transfer. Okay, so I've talked for a long time, and now I am going to get you to think a little bit. So we have a small room today, or we have a small audience today, so we can just all be in a central location. So in the next 10 minutes or so, let's have a discussion about the following questions. The first question is, what functions of your organization's work will be considered core competency related? And what functions could be considered non-core competency related? And then I would like you to discuss about what can your organization do with your staffing model to better focus or better support on your core competency related work. So Mike, would you like to host that or lead that through?
Yeah. I think for our office, the opportunity here would be in project related work, kind of like my own, where we've got, it's not so much competency as it is, well, sometimes there are projects that come to us that we may or may not actually have that core competency in-house. And then it's a short timeline it's a finite timeline of some sort. Probably delivering projects, the world of social media management. We actually do bring in a lot of subject matter experts like you. So this is a perfect example. We're doing it today. We do that quite often. So yeah, Sean actually doesn't need a big stable of full-time employees to achieve his objectives. I think that would be about where I would leave it, and I'll let somebody else take over. Some of these folks have really cool business models that dovetail right into this.
Thank you very much, Mike. Does anyone else would like to share?
Well, like for us in my organization, in the multiple organizations that we run out of here, I mean, our core competency, everything is addressed between the two partners. Realistically, my partner handles more of the tech side of our businesses, and I handle more of the sales and business and networking side of our businesses. And the vast majority of the rest of the work is all gig workers, hiring camera operators and sound techs and things like that. And as a general rule, we have a great relationship with all of these individuals that we can pull on with any project that we have on the go, whether we need to be bigger or smaller. So I think I feel more confident in our setup as of sitting through this workshop as opposed to not. I think that we're kind of set up what we need to be. I mean, running a business in COVID times right now is testing everybody, I think, to the maximum of their abilities to find out where they need to increase or decrease. And I think with us running bare bones, it's pretty much what's made the business work.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to share? If your organization, okay, so there are different ways of looking at the core competency or non-core competency related work when it comes to using employees versus gig workers or outsource it. So if your organization use gig workers or contractors to help with your core competency related work, again, core competency related work is never about your financial assets or physical assets. It's more about what makes you different, what makes you stay in business. So if you're using the experienced gig workers or contractors to focus on the core competency work, then you're wanting to make sure that you're building it, you're enlarging it, establishing a foundation, and also transferring that knowledge, the internal capacity. However, there are organizations who use gig workers to focus on the non-core competency related work. There's nothing wrong with that. So for example, some organizations will use the temporary staffing agency or the temp workers or gig workers to do administrative duties, customer service, phone representatives, or sales, or whatever the case may be. That means they want to focus the current existing employee base on the core competency work. They do not want the current employee to take time away or effort away doing the non-core competency related stuff. So it really depends on your business model and what your business needs. There is no one size fits all. There are companies out there that do have gig workers doing both type of work. So the second question on the screen is, I'm happy to hear that Rob said that he's very confident that his company is doing really well. So kudos to you, that's great. The staffing model, again, it really depends on organization's needs. Start small, start lean, and then expand eventually. So that will be my 2 cents on that. And also the other thing is that I have seen collaborations, clusters and collaborations among organizations a lot more than before during COVID and nowadays. I guess we're still in COVID. Yeah, so during COVID, is because organizations have realized that shared services model is a great way to go. Shared space is also a great way to go. Instead of, like renting or owning a huge office buildings that there is no need for it anymore, they rather share the space, pay cheaper rent. They have a brainstorming room such as the kitchen or the conference room that they can share and then can brainstorm with other companies within the same premises. And also with that being said, it's cheaper for these organizations. So for example, in the HR consulting world that my company occupies in, I collaborate oftentimes with a few of my competitors. So when I say that to other people, they find it very puzzling. Are you not afraid they will steal your trade secrets? Or they're asking about secret shoppers even. And they're also asking about, you're not afraid they'll copy your model and steal your clients? I'm like, everything is so public these days. Social media, all the communication tools help everything to become so transparent and fluid. I cannot safeguard my client's information. I mean, of course, I will safeguard confidential information, but I cannot safeguard who my clients are because it's all out there. It's all public information. And instead of being selfish, instead of protecting that territory information, I'd rather learn from others. So in my opinion, this is about a social learning experience. I collaborate with other organizations. We share each other's resources. We learn from each other's best practices. We both improve. So that's what I've seen a lot happening in the marketplace since COVID.
The nonprofit music organization that I oversee here in Medicine Hat, it's been an issue for many years with attracting volunteers, not just in our organization, but any organization we've found. And so we've begun discussions with one of the other music festivals here in the community and are working towards combining our volunteers. Both events are 6 months apart. They're both music related. And so we're finding that people are being receptive to the idea of sharing our volunteer pools to be able to, accomplish the greater goal.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Rob. All right. And even with the RFPs, what I have seen as the request for proposals is I've seen more and more joint ventures. So small companies, a lot of times they may or may not get the chance of being selected as the top bidders for large projects. So they rather a few companies have a joint venture developed together, and then they bid on the project. They have a bigger chance of being successful. They each earn some money. They each learn something. So the sharing model and also the collaboration is definitely becoming bigger and bigger. So thank you for all of your participation and attention. And to conclude, so we talk about the staffing, the traditional staffing model for today or in yesterday's workforce, but what's for tomorrow? So during COVID, what I have seen is that organizations are struggling with pivoting, with scaling up or scaling down quickly, given all the governmental opens, close, reopens, close changes, as well as the changes in the customers, the market demands, and etc. In my humble opinion, the ideal workforce for tomorrow will be when the organization takes into account of the societal changes, the organization's business needs, and the talent they can tap into, but still use it in an agile way to suit the needs of tomorrow. So how do we do that? Always come back to your business plan. What do we want to achieve as an organization today and tomorrow? What are core competency related work? What are non-core competency related work? Who should be doing what for how much time? And who do we currently have in the workforce? Is that sufficient? If not, we need to look elsewhere. And what kind of model do we do? Do we use employee-based or do we use a more contingent workers-based? So that concludes my webinar for today, and love to open the floor up to questions or comments that if you just want to have a free discussion, happy to hear that too.
So it's 1:20. You all have 10 minutes to eat the lunch that you so kindly didn't eat on camera and go to the bathroom and get to your next Zoom meeting at 1:30.